Meanwhile, Texas Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro serves on the Intelligence Committee. Congressman Castro tweeted his initial reaction to the bombshell BuzzFeed reporting Thursday night, writing, "If the BuzzFeed story is true, President Trump must resign or be impeached." Congressman Castro joining us now. Thank you very much for being with us. First of all, from what you've heard so far, if this report is true, would you want to proceed to impeachment? That is not what Nancy Pelosi has been saying and the Democratic leaders.
Yeah, I think if this report is true, if the president directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress, then that's a clear case of participating in perjury and obstruction of justice, and he should resign. But if he doesn't resign, he should be impeached.
You are a member of the Intelligence Committee. Did you hear Michael Cohen's testimony?
Yes, I was, along with Adam Schiff. He and I were the main Democratic questioners in that interview.
Is there any way that you can confirm what he said? Is it what he has claimed he said, that he prevaricated about the timing of the Trump Tower, when the Trump Tower negotiations ended?
Yeah, as you can imagine, Michael Cohen was in a very different place when he did that interview with us. And of course, he's admitted now lying to Congress. So that's part of the reason that we need to bring him back now to the Intelligence Committee, but possibly obviously to the Oversight Committee, perhaps the Judiciary Committee, and get to the bottom of this specific question. The other thing is that I hope that Bob Mueller will let him talk to us, because if this is the case, if this is true, what BuzzFeed has reported, then Congress needs to take action. It means that you have a president who is directing at least one person, and who knows, perhaps others, to lie to Congress.
What about the argument from many of your colleagues that you all should wait for the Mueller report, or for wherever Mueller reports to the Attorney General, before proceeding with anything on impeachment?
Look, I mean, there's something to that argument, and the reason is we can't, as compelling as this news article seems, we can't just go off of the news article. We have to either independently confirm it ourselves by bringing witnesses in, which we'll start doing. Adam Schiff said that yesterday. And then or the second thing is that Bob Mueller has already gone through that process, and he puts out a report before we have finished our investigation into this. So I think whichever of those two things comes first, if we determine that this report is true, then we should move forward with impeachment.
Do you consider the president's tweets, again going after Michael Cohen's father-in-law, as in any way an attempt to intimidate a witness who's about to testify on February 7th? And could that be obstruction?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it should be at least considered a form of witness tampering. He's trying to mess with a witness there. And it's actually just on a personal level, Andrea, if you think about it, how dangerous it is for that man when the President of the United States, who has a Twitter following of, I don't know, I don't follow him on Twitter, but 40 or 50 million people, whatever it is, and you're basically, maligning a specific person, that gets very dangerous on a personal level for someone
who is not a public official, or who is not
He's
a public
private
person.
citizen.
He's a private citizen, and in fact, someone who was an immigrant to this country as well. Let me play a little bit of what your twin brother, Julian, who's running for president, had to say on Morning Joe today on the subject of impeachment.
Based on last night's report about the president instructing his lawyer to lie to Congress, do you believe Congress should begin articles of impeachment against the president?
I believe that they should wait for the hearings and probably the Mueller report.
Before beginning, okay.
Yeah.
There seems to be a distance between you and your twin brother on this very subject of the timing.
No, it's actually the same, because if you look at my tweet, I said, if it's true, and I think other members of Congress have said the same thing. What we mean by that is, as I mentioned, it looks like a compelling news report, but you've actually got to go independently verify it, or you're relying on Bob Mueller to present it to you. So he's right. Either we've got to do the hearings, or you're going to get the Mueller report.
Just wondering very quickly, now that he's running and you're where you are, as kids, did you guys ever impersonate each other just to fool friends, family, anybody else?
No, we actually never did. We got accused of it, but never did. We switched classes one time. I think it was English class, but there was a substitute teacher, so I don't really count that.
So we're not going to see you in some debate if he's not quite up to it. Just
No,
kidding.
I said, Andrea, that I would grow either a beard, shave my head, or do something else to make sure that everybody knows I don't want to be mistaken for a presidential candidate, especially when I don't have Secret Service protection. So don't worry about that.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. I know it's a busy day for you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.